Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the business connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil and the world since 2009, and now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil for many years and known as the King of Networking, and talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest is Eva Vucheva, talking with us from Sofia, Bulgaria. Eva Vucheva is co-founder of Kool and Konscious, the world's biggest marketplace for sustainable and ethical fashion. She is also co-founder of Contento.tech, a data management company for e-commerce. Eva serves as an advisory board member of Taylor Hart in London and also Endeavor in Bulgaria. So with that, hello, Evan. Welcome to Talk to Brazil.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. And for our audience, Eva, I had a chance to hear you on a live on the future of fashion and commerce with Carlos Monteiro, who was also a guest here on Talk to Brazil. So the first question is, Izzy, what made you start Kool and Konscious, and help our listeners understand what is it?
Sure. To be honest, I didn't start it. I joined my partner who had started it in Hong Kong a year earlier. But my motivation to join and basically look for projects who are working on sustainable fashion and sustainability generally in production was very clear. Before starting my company Content.tech, I was managing one of the biggest e-commerce fashion marketplaces in Europe. And I've been with that company for about 5 or 6 years. And it was just at that time when the fashion industry started to change very dramatically and fast fashion became the king. So we saw this very fast turn of inventory. Prices went down, very, very steep fall. And then all of this inventory that was just laying around and people were not willing to buy at full price. And then we saw this devaluation of the fashion supply chain, which was very much something that bothered me. And then obviously as a company that had a huge volume of inventory, I know exactly what happens with items that are not sold and that they cannot be sold, right? I know where they end up. And, shamefully, I need to admit that I have been part of that, of adding up to that problem. And so at some point I realized that I want to do something to make a difference and to make a change. And I have been looking for projects working on sustainable fashion or circular economy, something that can make an impact on the environment. And by accident, almost a year and a couple of months ago, I met my partner, Bori, who had already started the company in Hong Kong, and she was looking for a partner to bring it to Europe. And so this is how I joined the company, and we became full-on partners, and we've been working on it ever since. Yes.
And, you found, like everybody knows today, the world is just one place. You don't really have to be anywhere. Sure. Wherever you are, you're everywhere, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we are now, as we had, we discussed earlier on the phone, we are now focused on UK, and this is our primary market for the Co and Konscious marketplace. However, the quarantine caught us in Sofia, which is, like a 3-hour flight away from London, and we have not been able to go there since the beginning of the pandemic. But still, we managed to do business well, and our partners in the UK are doing great in supporting us. So I think we've figured it out. I would even say that we are now more productive like this than when we had maybe 10 meetings a day.
Well, that seems to be the new normal in everything. And when we talk, I've been talking these last months to everybody, and everybody's working in a home office or in restricted travel plans. The point that you just made is important. Everybody has become more productive, and becoming more productive is more sustainable.
For sure. Also saving a lot of flights.
Right. Or cars or whatever. And what we're doing right now is basically what we would be doing if we were in a meeting, sitting face to face. We're talking.
Sure. Exactly.
And even showing and telling. I'm sure in fashion there's a lot of that exchange of looking at patterns and looking at styles. But today, you don't have to be there to see. You may have to. Why I need to touch it. That could be a point. But the rest, you see it. So to your site, I was going through the site, and for our listeners, it's Kool and Konscious, and the Kool is K. It's
with a K.
It's KOOLANDKONSCIOUS.com. And the site has a
nobody can.
Yeah, but has a
we
site.
make sure nobody can spell it. Yeah.
We need to spell it, and for podcasting, voice search, everything has to be spelled. But you have a section for women, for men, for brands. Mm-hmm. Very attractive site. And I've seen basically you've opened up a section there for home office. So you've taken to the present reality of what you call modern, streamlined, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, the best sellers at the moment are obviously leisure attire, right? Things that you can wear at home and be comfortable with. Even though now it starts to open up and shift a little bit, but we wanted to make sure that we have this vertical covered.
And that, from other statistics I've seen throughout the world, that's a segment in fashion that's grown.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And very strongly. Absolutely. Also, you have beachwear and you have cozy active, right?
Yes.
And cozy active is a staple for your everyday active lounging in the living room, which also is
exactly
habit forming right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the basis of what you're doing, and I've seen, is actually the focus on sustainability.
So what we do, right, is we are a platform that selects. What we are doing is, so Co and Konscious is a platform that selects sustainable brands from across the world. We have brands from Asia, from the US, from Europe, all over the place, from Africa, almost all the continents we cover. And we feature those brands that fit into certain criteria. We are very picky when it comes to sustainability because it is important for us to make room for sustainable brands and promote them around the world. So we vet all the brands that we work with and make sure that they actually use sustainable practices in production. And then we feature those brands. We do not hold any inventory, right? So whenever a purchase comes in, we make sure that the brand is aware of it. It is pretty automated process, right? Our systems are linked. And so they ship each order individually to the end customer. But we make sure to present those sustainable brands. And what we were thinking is that there are two perceptions for sustainable fashion that we wanted to address. One is that it is kind of crafty and not always very sexy looking and beautiful. Right. And so we wanted to make sure that our selection kind of shows that sustainable fashion can be of very high quality and very stylish. But also people think that sometimes it's too pricey. And so we wanted to also make sure that we cover a variety of price ranges. So we've essentially tried to go for affordable luxury, and I think we have achieved that. We have our prices range from €15, about 15 USD roughly, to 400 or 500 for a silk dress or something like that, which is and so this is the platform that we have been working on for almost a year. We launched in the UK at the end of 2019. A little bit unfortunate because 4 months into it, we got a little bit setback by the quarantine. But I'm very proud of the team because we really were able to pivot very quickly and figure out how to move throughout the quarantine. And it also helped us build the technology that we are now developing and taking into a separate company to offer it as a standalone product. As we discussed, and listeners can go on our website and see on every product page, we calculate the CO2 savings and water savings per product down to a single product level, right? So, for example, if you are looking at a T-shirt, it will say, because of the way it was produced or because of its material, it has saved certain number of kilograms of CO2, and it has saved a certain amount of water. And so we thought that this type of score is something that we call the impact score. It's part of our Impact ID technology. And so this score calculates all of these impacts, and then ultimately it will offer to end customers the option to actually mitigate the impact of each product on the environment, either by planting a tree or donating to a foundation that takes care of corals in the sea. And there are a big variety of organizations who cover that. But
just let me clear that up for our listeners. On the site, at the bottom of the site, you'll find Fashion Impact, and there you'll see impact score, which is IMPAKT score, SCORE. And clicking on impact score, that takes you to the page where you just mentioned. So you have the CO2 and water savings methodology, you have the formula, you have the CO2 emission savings, water savings. And so you're saying that is calculated for each product?
Yes. It's calculated for each product.
And impact score will become a standalone that you will offer to other companies.
Yes, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah. We think that that will just help companies because as we discussed in the previous conversation, we are now having a lot of talks with big companies and big retailers. We're talking to H&M, we're talking to ASOS in Europe, we're talking to John Lewis in the UK. So these are all rather big retailers. And we see that all of them have want to change and want to make an impact and change their practices and be more sustainable. The question is more of how, because there is not really an actionable framework for companies to go and just do it. So everybody is trying to figure it out on their own and by themselves. And what we thought is that if we can provide a standard for measuring the footprint on down to a product level, that standard can then help companies realize what they need to do to then mitigate the effect that they actually have. And we see that, as probably the first step towards going in direction of circularity or creating circular products, or at least products that can be biodegradable in the sense that they're not polluting the environment once they're thrown out in the fields.
Well, and also they can be recycled to some extent in another way, right? So, I think what's happening, and this is my impression here from Brazil, and I guess it's happening out in the world, the whole retail industry, and fashion is a large part of retail, is certainly the new normal is going to be completely different when we come out of this. The consumer habits of going into stores, physical presence definitely is going to change. But what I see with the impact score from a consumer standpoint, having a methodology that helps me as a consumer compare, because everybody's saying a different story, telling a different story, but actually to be able to compare apples with apples becomes difficult from a consumer standpoint. So I think to have a platform that's able to make the calculation and making that visible will help both sides.
You're making a very good point. I think that's one of the issues, because we are not the first ones to come up with a methodology. It's probably the difference comes from the way we calculate it, and so what companies are doing, it's very easy to calculate it if you are a direct-to-consumer brand, because then you are aware of your supply chain.
Right.
And so right? You know exactly where you have produced, more or less, depending on how big you are, but your supply chain down to a certain level, so you can more or less calculate some sort of an impact score.
Right.
However, it just varies. And so for the end customer, if I want to go and compare the impact of 3 different brands, then I wouldn't know, because everybody uses different type of algorithm to calculate. So for us, I think it is important to try to standardize that,
right,
if you wish, so that everybody is on the same page and works on the same agenda.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely needed. So eventually that's going to become another company?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Well, talking about companies and developing companies, you are a female business leader. And I also see that you are advisory for Endeavor. Endeavor also here in Brazil and throughout the world, obviously
yes,
has
it's a very
the
strong
focus.
network.
Yeah, very strong network, but also not only the fact strong network, strong concepts in helping persons develop, right, in this new area. How do you see that happening? How do you see what you have done? You've talked about your past. I mean, now we're talking about your future. And we're talking about future generations. Europe, the States, Asia here, I can see a trend towards wanting to have a better world. I think one of the things that the pandemic has shown the world is how much we've actually hurt the world. When you see the water is cleaner, the air is cleaner, the animals are coming back, taking over the planet, which is theirs.
And it's fascinating.
I think people are more aware of what we're doing to the planet. Do you see that happening?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, I do. And I'm very blessed to be working with a very young team. Even though, I mean, sometimes it's hard for me. But I think that the generations that are coming now are much more aware and much more eager to work, even though there is a certain naivete in the way that they approach problems that comes just from age.
Right. No, it does.
But this is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. Because, sometimes we are so used to being in our old ways and doing things the same way. And sometimes you need a fresh look into something. And because of these generations, I feel all of them are aware, and it's not of like I would say that I'm almost 40, so in my generation, I think a small fraction of people are aware and thinking about sustainability and environment, even though the number is increasing. I think with younger generations, it is probably 80% of those people are interested and focused on sustainability and just making a better world. And so I kind of think that the time is now to make the change. And not that I think it, but we also know that with climate change, we do have a very limited amount of time to actually do something to kind of save our own selves, if you wish.
No, that's true. You're coming to your 40s. I'm 72. My worry is more for my grandchildren. And really, what is the world that my generation is leaving?
Sure.
We've done a poor job of keeping it.
Sure. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're giving a world to people, and that's the worry. But I find my grandchildren are very much more aware, speaking of sustainability on daily habits, than most other people are. And change has to start early. I think before we thought, that everything was boundless. We had excess of everything, but life is limited. So the raw materials are limited, and I think people are becoming aware of that now. Yeah,
I think what we are also becoming aware of is that how little we actually need, other than the toilet paper, who was like the most sought of product.
Right.
I think, even in the fashion industry, we see that apart from obviously the leggings and things to lounge in at home, people have not really been buying a lot of fashionable items during the quarantine, and it just makes you aware of how much you have and how little you actually need.
Well, I get back. Obviously, part of the industry has been that. Part of the drive in publicity is to every time somebody shows up with the same clothes, that becomes a headline.
Sure, yeah.
And I think we have to change that. I think the headline will change that, thank God somebody's used the same dress with the same shirt twice.
Yes. Well, it starts now.
And it's starting. Yeah.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I mean, when in 2010, when I was working still on Fashion Days on my previous company, there was maybe in the years before that we would have maybe 4 or 5, no, not really, maybe 2 or 3 collections per year. You would have summer, spring, summer, and you would have winter, autumn, winter, and then some capsule in between, right? And at some point it started turning, and I think now we're averaging 8 collections per year. And the value of items on full price items on the shelf has decreased. So, for example, some years ago it was maybe 2.5 months full price of an item on the shelf, and now a retailer would be lucky to get it at 30 days full price before starting to discount. So it is something that we have all done to ourselves, essentially, of like perpetuating this fast fashion moment. Fast fashion is even not the right word, because there are ways to produce sustainably and still do the fast fashion.
No, I agree. I think the whole concept of using everything has changed radically, and this is over the last 3 months. So, and when you're talking about 2010, it seems like you're talking about 200 years ago, because what we've seen happening since February to now that we're talking in June, the world's changed considerably, and the mindset of people has changed considerably. So I think your timing is perfect from my point of view. The fact also that you have an e-commerce platform is even better, because another thing that everybody has learned and does still function is buying online. So that's increased.
Yeah. That's increased, exactly.
And a lot everywhere here in Brazil, I know. So, and I'm sure in Europe and throughout the world. So people have become comfortable in a different way. They're comfortable with buying. They're comfortable with looking. The logistics.
Yes.
One of the things that has still worked reasonably well is logistics.
Yes.
So
well, actually, they had to. They had to kind of figure out a way to grow faster, because now the demand has increased so dramatically for last mile deliveries and fulfillment centers.
Right. Well, what's your feeling now today in Europe? Do you have a feeling people are getting back into the streets? Is life
life is coming back to
You're
normal.
Outside?
Yeah, we are outside. I think in Sofia, because the restrictions were pretty strict, and then once we were allowed to go out, people went back to normal so quickly that now I think we are awaiting a new period of lockdown, because the cases of coronavirus have increased very steeply. But I think all over Europe, people are trying to get back to normal and kind of try to learn to live with this new reality where you need to take account of how you behave and where you are, and if you're wearing a mask and washing your hands, etc. I think in the UK, retailers are rather uncertain what it means for them, this reopening. What we have heard from our partners there is that the companies who are open now feel like they should close, because just the fixed costs for opening the stores is much higher than what they're generating in revenue at the moment. So there is that. So we need to find a new way of figuring out retail that needs to be redefined. And I think, unfortunately, I feel that that's not going to be our last pandemic. It's probably the beginning of a few more to follow. So we need to figure out a way to kind of live with that fear in mind and with that risk in
But I see the point that you've taken, and I agree with you. Retail will be different everywhere, period.
Yeah.
And that's here in Brazil, the same thing. Stores have opened, but people haven't gone in. But I think part of that is back to what you mentioned, the we call the essentialism, that people are being aware that maybe I don't need so many things anymore. And, and then back to the sustainability, because what I do have, and this is what I've done here, and I know many other people have done, you have all this time at home, you start looking at your closets and start digging out old photos and other things to pass time. And then you really realize what you don't need. You value what you do need, and that's important. But obviously, some things you say, well, I don't need that anymore. And then what do I do with it? And then you get back to the recycling, what can happen with that. So I think the 2 points that I see as major game changers are e-commerce will become stronger, in-store retail, not so much.
Well, it has to change, but I think to your last point of what do you do with the things that you don't have, I just want to mention an initiative that we've done in the UK. We are working with a company called Thrift Plus, and so essentially what it allows is like you can order a bag from them to your home, and you can fill it with your old clothes and donate it to them. And what Thrift Plus is doing is they photoshoot it, they sell it on their platform, and then you can either donate the profits to a charity of your choice, or you can earn a little bit of money for yourself as well from the items that you no longer use. So this was one of the initiatives we started during the quarantine, and it turned out to be very appreciated by the customers.
I noticed that on the site. Is that part of, I saw on the link to buy value?
That's the circulate.
The pre-owned coming soon.
Button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great idea. Great idea.
Yeah. It worked out well, I think, and people really appreciate it for us not pushing them to buy things that they don't really need it at that point of time. But we thought since people are at home and, with a lot of time on their hands, they can do.
Well, come here to Brazil and start this. I can fill up a bag with all my clothes and start. Very good. Well, Eva, I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time, but before we go, I want to congratulate you, not only the site, but what you're doing, because it's...
Thank you, Tom.
Life has shown that obviously everybody cares about sustainability, but literally to sell sustainability, to have people buy the idea is not easy.
It's not easy. It's tough.
No, there's a lot of lip service out there, but I do admire your dedication to it, and more than the dedication to what you've actually done, you have a beautiful site. You have what you said, attractive articles that they're stylish, they're affordable, and the impact score, I think, is something that's needed. That could also be a game changer. So. What you have done, what you're doing, I do hope your next 100 years will be as fruitful as this year for you. So that when we're back talking when you're 120, then we can look back on this.
Yes, let's keep this recording and catch up in 100 years.
No, but I think the secret is you need to believe, and I think you're a believer.
I do, absolutely.
You need to keep telling people about it, but not only telling, you're showing definite hands-on results, and that's important, and that's more important than just important. So keep up the good work. That's the point. Okay.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure being with you guys, and thank you for listening.
Well, for us too. So I want to let our listeners know you can find more about Eva. It's Eva, E-V-A. Her last name is Vucheva. It's V-U-C-H-E-V-A. You find her on LinkedIn. Also the site Kool and Konscious, and I'll repeat, that's KOOLAND, KONSCIOUS.com. KoolAndKonscious.com. and also Contento.tech. Contento.tech is CONTENTO.TECH. I'd like to thank you, our audience, and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. And more about them on their site, which is www.focusmi.com. And our website, www.talktobrazil.com, to find our previous shows of Talk to Brazil, which are also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. So remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.